Welcome back to another genre guide video, specifically talking about the plot of male-led urban fantasy. This is a specific flavor of fantasy where the hero worries less about saving a kingdom and more about paying rent, usually while fighting a werewolf in a dark alley or something like that. And we all know the vibe: the gritty detective, the cynical mercenary, the hidden magical world. But how do you actually structure that story so it keeps readers turning pages until 3 a.m.? And if you don't know who I am, my name is Jason Hamilton. I'm a fantasy author, and I spent 3 years of Kindlepreneur helping writers understand the business of books, and now I'm just obsessed with storytelling mechanics. I recently did a massive deep dive into the best-selling male-led urban fantasy novels, books with over 1,000 reviews and high ratings, and I used AI to tear them apart scene by scene. And today I'm treating you with the result of that meta-analysis, a complete beat-by-beat plot template for writing a hit in this specific genre. Starting with Act 1, we are going to be moving through this fast because we have 32 chapters to fill, and every single one needs to pull its weight. In this genre, pacing is king. If you bore the readers for 3 pages, they're gone. Let's look at how the bestsellers handle the first act. Chapter 1 is the disrupted routine. You don't start with a prophecy, you don't start with a prologue about the dark wars of 1812, you start with a guy doing a job he probably hates. The protagonist needs to be introduced in his natural habitat, and this is usually a low-status or gritty environment. Maybe he's a private investigator, an occult shop owner, or a mercenary. The key here is financial struggle. We need to know that he is good at magic or fighting, but kind of bad at life. Then you interrupt him. A client walks in, or a mundane authority figure calls him up. It's a job, and our hero shouldn't want it. He's cynical. He views this as a nuisance. This establishes his voice, which is world-weary, sarcastic, and often reluctant. And this is the baseline for your masquerade. Show us the normal before you break it. Chapter 2 is the scene of the crime. Now the hero gets to work. He arrives at the scene of the incident, and this is your chance to show, not tell, the magic system. He needs to use specific supernatural senses or tools to find evidence the cops missed. The twist here is immediate. This isn't a normal job. The evidence points to something way above his pay grade, like a dangerous entity or violation of magical law. He realizes the stakes aren't just about his paycheck anymore. Someone is watching him. You need a minor confrontation here or a warning from a hidden observer just to prove the threat is real. Chapter 3 is the authorities' warning. In classic noir fashion, you need the pincer dynamic. The hero is investigating a dangerous villain, so now you need the good guys to pressure him too. A powerful figure from the supernatural governing body, whatever that looks like, a council, a cabal, the wardens, confronts him. They tell him to drop the case, or they give him an impossible deadline under threat of execution. So now the hero is trapped. He's being hunted by the bad guy and squeezed by the law. He refuses to back down, usually because of the stubborn moral code, or maybe because he just needs the money that badly. But Chapter 4 is called the client meeting. We need to care about the villain. Action means nothing without emotional context, so the protagonist has a quiet moment with the client. This scene shifts the motivation from financial to moral. The client reveals a secret they were holding back. Maybe it's a hidden heritage or a dark past. The protagonist realizes he is the only person in the city capable of fixing this mess, so he solidifies his role as the reluctant protector. Chapter 5 is the sidekick and the sanctuary. You need a pacing break, so the hero goes to his home base. This is his sanctuary. We meet the sidekick or ally. This character handles the exposition and often the comic relief. They analyze the clues found in Chapter 2 and realizes that the enemy is vastly clearer and more dangerous than anticipated. This scene highlights the found family trope, and it shows us what the hero is fighting to defend. Chapter 6 is the first ambush. The talking is over. The antagonist knows the hero is sniffing around, and they send a message. While following a lead, the protagonist gets ambushed, and this is not a fair fight. These are minions or hired guns, but the attack is surprisingly lethal. The hero has to use magic and physical violence to survive. He barely makes it out, or manages to capture one guy for questions. Chapter 7 is the interrogation in the underworld. The hero takes the info from the ambush and goes on the offensive. He descends into the seedy supernatural underbelly. Think of a goblin's market or a vampire nightclub or a wizard's dive bar. He uses intimidation to get answers. This establishes the detective element of the story. He meets an untrustworthy informant or something like that. They give him a lead, but they have their own agenda. Nothing is free in this world. Chapter 8 is crossing the threshold. This is the end of Act 1 and the point of no return. The lead takes the protagonist to a dangerous location or forces a ritual that commits him to the conflict. He uncovers proof of a larger conspiracy, and it's not just a murder, it's actually a power grab or an apocalyptic ritual. The hero realizes he cannot turn back now even if he wanted to, so the door has closed behind him. That leads us into Act 2. Act 2 is where most writers get lost. They wander around aimlessly, but in urban fantasy, Act 2 is a straight line of escalation. Chapter 9 is the impossible threat. You need to establish the power gap immediately. The protagonist encounters a threshold guardian, like a monster or a mage guarding the next step. This enemy is way stronger than the hero. The hero cannot win in a fair fight. He has to retreat or use a dirty trick to survive. This shows the reader that brute force won't work. It forces the hero to be clever. Chapter 10 is mundane interference. Just when things get magical, drag it back to reality. The real police or a mundane obstruction gets in the way. The hero is detained or questioned. He then has to navigate the masquerade. He has to lie to the cops to protect the secret world while knowing the real killer is getting away. And that isolates him. He is trapped between the supernatural monster and the human law. Chapter 11 is the B-story connection. The protagonist escapes the red tape and seeks help from a love interest or a close ally. This slows the pace down a bit. We need emotional vulnerability here. They talk about the past or their trauma, and it raises the personal stakes. If the hero fails, this person also will likely die or come to harm. He gets a key piece of info or a magical item from this ally. Chapter 12 is the discovery. Using that new resource, the hero breaks into a secure location, like an office, a lair, or a warehouse. He finds the smoking gun, which is a dossier or an artifact or something that reveals the antagonist's true intention. The discovery is worse than he thought. It usually involves a betrayal or corruption of something pure. And by the way, I have published a book that goes into more depth on the genre of male-led urban fantasy, and you can buy that book on Amazon, but you can also get it at no extra charge along with many other book genre analyses by joining the Story Hacker Gold group, and I walk you through the entire process to go from having nothing to having your book in hand, all with the tools you need to market it, and we even get into how AI can help enhance your process without diminishing your creativity or compromising your ethics. So go check that out in the link below. Chapter 13 is called The Sanctuary Breached. This is your midpoint, and in urban fantasy, the midpoint usually means something blows up. The hero returns to the safe house, the one we established in Chapter 5, and it's compromised. The bad guy is sent a hit squad, the wards fail, the hero has to fight a defensive battle in his own living room. High collateral damage, and a sense of safety is destroyed. But Chapter 14 is the midpoint reversal. The battle ends with a Pyrrhic victory. Bad guys retreat, but the hero is wrecked. A second character might be hurt or taken. The hero is bleeding and his home is trashed. He realized that reaction is dead. He can't just investigate anymore. He has to go to war. The genre shifts from mystery to survival. Chapter 15 is recovery and rage. The hero licks his wounds in a, rundown motel or on a friend's couch, and he is emotionally volatile. He tries to push his allies away to protect them, but they refuse to leave. This reaffirms the bond. They hatch a plan that is dangerous and definitely illegal. Chapter 16 is the deal with the devil. The hero isn't strong enough yet, so he needs an edge. He seeks out a morally gray third party, a demon or a fey lord or a crime boss. He makes a bargain and he trades a favor or a piece of his soul for power or information. This foreshadows trouble for future books, but he needs it to survive tonight. Chapter 17 is the betrayal. The new intel actually leads him into a trap. Turns out a trusted member of his circle or that authority figure from Chapter 3 was actually working for the villain. The hero is captured or pinned down, and the betrayal cuts deep. No one can be trusted. This is the all is lost setup. Chapter 18 is the escape. You planted a seed earlier in the book, a minor skill or an item like Chekhov's gun, and now the hero uses it. He escapes the trap, and it's a gritty, painful sequence. He leaves bodies behind. He crosses a moral line he was trying to avoid. He is desperate. Chapter 19 is the second pinch point. The villain realizes the hero escaped. He accelerates the timeline. He attacks a civilian target or a love interest to draw the hero out. He sets a deadline, come to me by sundown or the city burns, that sort of thing. The stakes are now at maximum. That leads us into Act 3, starting with Chapter 20, The Dark Night of the Soul. At this point, the hero is exhausted and he's outgunned. He has a moment of despair where he thinks about running. He looks at a totem, a picture, a voicemail, and remembers why he fights. He accepts that he might die, but decides to make it count. Chapter 21 is gathering the team. He rallies the survivors, like the sidekick, the love interest, maybe a former rival. They outline a suicide mission, and everyone gets a role. Weapons are loaded, spells are prepped, grim camaraderie. Chapter 2 is the infiltration. A team approaches a stronghold like a skyscraper, a ruin, or a portal, and they use stealth to bypass the outer defenses. Tension is high, and it goes smoothly at first, but almost too smoothly. Chapter 23 is the plan falls apart, and this is where everything goes wrong. The team is separated, the hero is cut off, he has to proceed alone towards the center, and this forces the one-on-one confrontation that we've been waiting for. Chapter 24 is the revelation of evil. The hero reaches the boss, the antagonist reveals the full plan, and it's honestly horrific. They offer the protagonist a join me temptation. The hero rejects it with a quip. Chapter 25 is the sacrifice. The battle begins and it goes badly. To break the defenses, an ally makes a sacrifice of some kind. They can get hurt or use up all their magic. The hero sees this and absolutely loses it, and he fills with cold fury. Chapter 26 is the duel. This is direct combat with magic and fists. The environment is destroyed. The hero tries to use the MacGuffin he found earlier, but it doesn't work right. He has to improvise, and he fights dirty to win. Chapter 27 is the moral choice. The villain might be down, but not dead. The authorities scream for an arrest. The hero knows the system is broken, so he executes the villain or ensures a fate worse than death. The threat is gone forever, but this defines him as an anti-hero. Chapter 28 is the immediate aftermath. So at this point, we're at an adrenaline crash. The hero surveys the ruins, the client is safe, but the cost was high. He shares a look with the survivors, and they too are changed. Chapter 29 is the cleanup. The cleaners arrive to cover up the magic. The hero is debriefed. He gets yelled at for breaking the rules, but let go because he, saved the day. The masquerade is then restored, and he has made powerful enemies, which sets up the sequels. Chapter 30 is the funeral or the hospital, which is a quiet scene, visiting the injured or burying the dead, and it grounds the fantasy in real emotion, and yet the ally usually confirms that the fight was worth it. Chapter 31 is payment and reflection. The hero gets paid, he pays his rent or feeds his cat. He returns to his routine, but the routine feels different at this point. He is actually leveled up. Chapter 32 is the new threat. Relaxing in the sanctuary, the phone rings or a package arrives. Some kind of new monster has arrived, a new mystery. The hero sighs, grabs his coat, and steps out. Fade to black. All right. So that template works perfectly for book 1, and it sets up the hero, introduces the magic, and forces a reluctant guy to be a hero. But then what happens if you write book 2 or book 12? Urban fantasy series like this have been known to go on for a little bit. The number of sequels in urban fantasy vary wildly, and it's more like a TV procedural than an epic fantasy trilogy. You might write 20 books about the same guy. And because of that, you can't just copy and paste the template. Things actually have to evolve. So let's start with what changes. First, the refusal of the call disappears by book 2 when the phone rings. In this case, he answers it. Because he's a pro now, you don't need 3 chapters of him saying no again. Second, the masquerade becomes a tool, not a shock. He knows how to hide the bodies. He knows who to bribe. Third, the stakes escalate. In book 1, he saves a client, and in book 5, he saves the city. In book 10, he might be fighting a god. Fourth, the cast expands. You pick your strays. The team gets bigger, meaning your combat scenes can get more complex. But what stays the same? The DNA of the genre must stay the same. Readers want the same case of the week kind of feel to it. You still need the cold open showing him doing his job. You still need the investigation phase. Don't lose the detective work. You still need the midpoint disaster. You must stop hunting and start being hunted. You still need the power disparity. If the hero gets stronger, the villain must also get scarier. When you sit down to outline book 2, use the template as a skeleton. Keep the pillars like the inciting incident and the midpoint and the climax, but swap out the details. If he's rich now, swap the financial struggle for a leadership struggle. The core emotion creates the ultimate structure. The details are just the dressing. Structure offers freedom. Once you know exactly what the walls are, you can paint whatever you want on them. And by the way, I have published a book that goes into more depth on the genre of male-led urban fantasy, and you can buy that book on Amazon. But you can also get it at no extra charge, along with many other book genre analyses by joining the Story Hacker Gold group. And I walk you through the entire process to go from having nothing to having your book in hand, all with the tools you need to market it. And we even get into how AI can help enhance your process without diminishing your creativity or compromising your ethics. So go check that out in the link below, and I'll see you in the next video.